Welcome to another episode of The Evaluation Couch, the podcast where we talk about career growth and the field of evaluation. This is your host, Maria Montenegro. I am so excited about this episode today, not only because it's the first one with my new podcast music, which was produced by a dear friend of mine, but also because it is the first of a series of episodes that are going to focus on job searching. I know that job searching is a topic that many people have questions about and have reached out to me about. Often we want to jump into thinking about how to build our resume, how to perform well in interviews, how to sell ourselves. But instead, I thought it was important to start on the topic of healthy mindsets. Job searching is a process that is unavoidable in our career journeys. It is also a process that requires vulnerability, and it can impact our mental health and our self-esteem. So I'm going to start this episode sharing a story of one of the first heartbreaks that I had in my career. When I was doing my master's in agriculture and resource economics, I was in a very research-focused program. I spent about a year and a half working only on my thesis after doing a year of courses. And my thesis used an index to measure women's empowerment in agriculture. I went to Peru, I used this index to collect data. I spent a lot of time doing complex analysis with all the data that I collected. When I was finishing my master's, the organization that developed this index was hiring for a research analyst position to work on the index and specifically focus on the index and its application in Latin America. When I read it, I honestly thought that someone had read my thesis and developed a job posting based on it. I couldn't believe my luck. So of course, I applied. I had the support of my supervisors. I made the most targeted resume because I had just been working on this index for so long. After applying, I received an email saying that I was longlisted for the position. They asked for my codes, they asked for writing samples, and then I never heard back. Not even an email saying that I didn't make it to the interview stage, nothing. Ouch. I was very disappointed, and I spent a lot of time trying to think what I did wrong. Was it maybe my codes? Were they not organized enough? Were my writing samples not good enough? Did I just not have the experience for that type of role yet? And I'm sure that many of you can relate to this experience of digesting and processing and trying to make sense of being rejected for a job, especially when it is a job that you really thought you were a great candidate for. If you're struggling with this, or if you have in the past, you're not alone. It has happened to many of us. A survey found that 56% of unemployed adults experience mental health issues due to job searching. And 36% of younger job seekers, so Gen-Zers and millennials, have sought therapy because of job search challenges. Not finding a job has implications on our lives that create multiple stresses. But it can also impact our self-esteem. It can make us wonder, if it is us, are we not enough? In this episode, which is the first of this series, I want to share what really happens during the hiring process. What happens on the side of the organization that is hiring for the role. My hope is that if you're experiencing this, or when you experience it in the future, you use this information to bring a different perspective to what you're experiencing. Whether it is not getting an interview or not getting an offer after you interviewed, the reality is that finding a job is influenced by external factors that are completely outside your control. And it might have nothing to do with you. Don't get me wrong. There's always things that we can do to improve our career outcomes. We can always prepare ourselves better when we're applying for jobs, to improve our resumes, to improve how we respond to interview questions, to understand and communicate the value that we can bring to an organization. And yet, recognizing the reality of how the job market functions and what happens behind the scenes can help you maintain your perspective, protect your self-esteem, and build your resilience. And this is going to help you perform better in your job search. And most importantly, it's going to be beneficial for your well-being. I'm going to be drawing from my experience being on the hiring table, my experiences in career advising, and also research and statistics around hiring processes. And I'm going to paint a picture of what might be going on when you apply for a job that might be influencing the outcomes that you're seeing. Before I get started, I do want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that these things happen in all organizations. But what I am saying is that they can happen. They do happen. So it is important to be aware of them. Okay, so the first thing I want to share is that if you're using a job search platform online, when you see a job posting in whatever platform it is that you use, there is a possibility that that job is not open. Some organizations have to follow policies that make them advertise job postings, even if they already have a candidate that has that job pretty much secured. So even if you're a great candidate on paper, that position is just not really open. Many times, some organizations actually will review candidates and consider them. But the chances of getting that position, especially when there's an internal candidate running for it, are very slim. Even if a position is actually open, sometimes the job posting might not truly reflect what the organization is looking for. And this can happen for many reasons. It is not a great human resource practice, but it can happen. I had an experience where I saw a job posting online, and it was pretty general. It provided an overall description of what the role was for, but only after reaching out to the hiring manager, I learned a lot of details that were not in the job posting, including that the position was actually focused on a specific type of evaluation and on a specific type of topic that wasn't even named on the job posting. If I had only seen the job posting online, I wouldn't have known how to really target my application to show that I had the relevant skills required for that work. Now, you might be wondering why organizations do this. Oftentimes, it's because of resources. It's because they have urgency. Adapting job postings isn't necessarily something that they can do. Sometimes there's a lot of bureaucracy, so adapting an existing job posting can take many weeks. And teams might decide to use something they already have instead of adapting it to show the specific needs of that position at that point in time. Now, let's assume that you apply for a position that is actually open and that has an accurate job description. When you send your application, you're one of many other people doing the same thing. Sometimes you're competing with 50, 100 people, depending on the size of your organization. Sometimes it can be thousands of people. So whoever is on the other side, on the hiring process, and reviewing all of those applications, they have a lot of work to do. So picture this. On top of all of your job responsibilities, the multiple things that you're engaged in at work, you have to review 100 applications for one position. What would you do? You probably would do what recruiters, HR managers, and anyone reviewing resumes does. You would spend very little time in each application, skimming through them and filtering to create a short list of candidates. It is estimated that those in recruitment positions spend only 6 to 8 seconds on an initial resume review. 6 to 8 seconds. That is not a lot. The person reading your resume is only going to spend a few seconds on it. It is so easy for your amazing skills and experiences to be outshined in this process. And it is especially easy when you consider who might be reading these resumes for the first time. We all like to think when we're writing a resume and our cover letter that the person who would be our boss is going to be reading this and is going to decide whether we're a good fit for the position or not. But in many organizations, this actually doesn't happen. Many times, the person reading resumes and creating this short list of candidates is someone from human resources or a similar role. And although they have experience in recruitment, they're not necessarily experts in your field. What this means is that names, acronyms, technical terms related to your profession will not necessarily bring the same meaning to the person reading your resume as they would for someone experienced in your field. So if your application is not explicit in showing that you have the skills, experiences, and qualifications required for the job, it might end up in the rejected pile even before your potential boss actually has a chance to see it. And I can almost guarantee that if you're still with me in this episode, you are already thinking and wondering, what about applicant tracking systems? What about the instances when a software is reviewing my resume rather than a human? An applicant tracking system is a software that helps organizations streamline some of their recruitment and human resources processes, including reviewing applications and oftentimes scanning for keywords to identify candidates that are most likely to match the requirements of the position. I've noticed that when people bring this up, when I'm helping them build their resumes, it seems like they have a negative discourse around this type of software and having basically a machine deciding whether or not they're going to get an interview or be selected for a job. But when you consider the amount of time that a human recruiter spends on your resume, as well as the fact that they may not be as familiar with your profession as we would like, having a software reviewing your resume is not necessarily such a scary thing. And I also think that knowing how common these systems are in the type of organization that you will be applying to can change how you perceive them and how much time you spend worrying about this. So about 22% of small and medium-sized businesses use applicant tracking systems. If you work in the nonprofit sector, the type of organizations that you would apply are most likely to fall in this category. In contrast, 70% of larger businesses are likely to have these systems. If you're thinking about Fortune 500 companies, for example, almost all of them use them. There's not a lot of data about the public sector, but considering that these systems require significant amounts of cost and complex change management processes, it is assumed that they're less common in the public sector. This industry is growing globally because it optimizes costs and processes. But we still don't know when the public sector and the nonprofit sector are going to catch up. But the reality is that you may encounter companies that use humans as well as software to screen your application, and now even artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, these systems are going to do the same thing that a human would do. They're going to screen through your application and try to see if there's keywords that indicate that you have the skills required for the position, with the assumption that that's an indication that you would be a good match. So far we've discussed a few things that may happen when you apply for a job that may influence you getting or not an interview, even if you're an amazing candidate. But there's another set of factors outside of our control that can happen at any moment in the hiring process. And they are biases. There is a lot of evidence and research about biases in the hiring process, and this is a sad reality of the world we live in. We know that it impacts some groups more than others, and there are so many different types of biases you can experience during the hiring process. I actually found an article that described 16 different types. These biases range from beauty bias, where people who are more physically attractive have better outcomes, to the halo effect, where a strength or a positive experience of a candidate can influence the overall opinion of the candidate's qualifications, making them look stronger than they actually are, to affinity bias, which is a very common one. This is known as similarity bias, where people unconsciously have a tendency to get along better with people that are similar to them, and they may rate them more positively than other candidates during a hiring process. And all the way to nonverbal bias, which involves misreading someone's body language and even drawing negative or wrong conclusions from them. There are many human resource strategies to reduce these biases, but the extent to which organizations implement them varies widely. The reality is that bias exists, and unfortunately, bias could be the reason why you do not get a job. There's also cases of discrimination, which is when an organization makes a hiring decision based on a personal characteristic that is not relevant for the position, such as gender identity, age, religion, and so on. If you experience discrimination during a hiring process, the first thing you need to keep in mind is that it is not your fault. The second thing that I would suggest you consider is whether you would even want to work in a place where these type of things happen. And thirdly, if it feels appropriate for you, you may want to consider reporting the incident. In the notes of this episode, I've added a few links that can help you learn more about what discrimination in the workplace looks like, including in the hiring process, as well as what are some of the actions that you can take when you experience it. I'm not suggesting that this will happen in every organization, but it can happen. And the point is that when we apply for a job, there are so many things happening within that organization that are outside our control. But what is within our control is what we can do. There are things we can do in light of this reality. The first thing you can do is work on your resume. You really want to remember someone might only spend 8 seconds or less reviewing your resume before they decide whether to put you in the rejection pile or move you to the next stage of the hiring process. Working on your resume is very important. Your information has to be easy to skim, well organized, and relevant. You also have to be explicit. Do not assume that people will understand things you're not writing down, because the person reading your resume might not have the same context that you have. You do want to use keywords, because whether it is a software that will scan your resume or a human, keywords will highlight how your qualifications overlap with what the job position requires. If you have been applying for jobs and you are facing job rejection, you may also want to try different strategies. Maybe you need to try something else, like networking, reaching out to people, learning about their jobs, seeing if there's other opportunities that maybe are not being posted in online platforms, asking for referrals. These might not always work, but as long as you're respectful, you will not lose anything by trying, and you might even learn a few things. Another thing you can do in light of this reality is asking for feedback, but filtering this feedback. If there is a potential for bias to inform the outcome of an application, you may not want to take that feedback to heart, especially if it does not align with your values. And if this is sounding a little bit vague, especially because we're talking about biases, I actually have an example that I can share from my experience. It wasn't even that long ago. I was interviewing for a role, and it was an online panel. After I didn't get the position, I asked for feedback. One of the feedback that was provided to me was that I did not maintain eye contact during the interview, which was online with multiple people. This is an example of nonverbal body language bias. When I received that feedback, I thanked them for the feedback. But I also realized that it is not aligned with my values to judge someone's qualifications based on their ability to maintain eye contact in an online meeting. So I didn't really internalize that feedback. What I would advise you to do is that next time, when you apply for a job, you write, say out loud, and repeat to yourself the following: the outcome of this job application does not define my value. Repeat this every time you're opening your email, hoping to see an interview invitation. Every time that you're checking your phone to see whether you received a call offering you that job. Repeat it until you believe it. Because the reality is that no job application defines your value. So to sum up, this week we went over what really goes on during the hiring process to help you have a different perspective and know that there are many factors outside your control that may be influencing the outcomes that you're seeing. Next week, we're going to delve deeper into specific things that you can do to build resiliency during your job search process.